Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, and a very special welcome to a man that he's got two cameras. He's only operating one camera at the moment, but he's got a very nice background, a beautiful a photo wall. Mr. Ken Lundin, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, and the president and founder of a company called Rev Heat. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Oh, well, this is going to be a blast. I'm excited to be here, Darren. And, it's always fun when I get to talk to the people from down under. You'll make lots of bad state references. I'll make lots of bad Australian references. And at the end of the day, we'll create a little book and a cheat sheet so people know what the hell we talked about.
That's it. You know what? It's funny you should say that because what I've noticed over the last couple of years, because I've interviewed a lot of people from the States. I've only realized now there's only a small number of euphemisms or phrases that completely go over each other's heads. I'm actually getting pretty good that most of us can understand each other, which is cool.
Yeah, well, now I'm going to make some stuff up as we go. So I'm going to act like it's mainstream just to test that theory.
So, mate, really looking forward to this conversation. You're the founder and president of Rev Heat, and we're going to talk about sales and sales leadership, and particularly, I know you mentioned a lot about the fact that a lot of people out there think sales is an art form, and there's probably an element of truth to that because a true artist actually knows exactly what they're doing. But I think you come more from a position of science and how sales is really a science. And if we can actually get really good at that, we can drive sustainable and replicable results. So looking forward to this conversation. Where did it all start for you?
Oh, goodness. Where do I start? Now, I think when it comes back to like why we're doing what we're doing is if you just go back a little ways. So I owned my first business between 2006 and 2011 when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, from Phoenix, Arizona. So we moved over here then, and I owned my business. And then people may remember there was something called the Great Recession. The economy went to hell. It was nasty. So I got my first taste of like the real risks associated with business ownership. It was like December 2nd or so, and somebody knocked on my door. And when they knocked on my door, my little girl she came up and she was just turning 12, and she's on my hip. And we had all the Christmas stuff out and whatever. And this guy knocks on the door, and I open it, and he looks really perplexed. He's super confused. And then I am too. I'm like, well, you knocked on my door. And he says, well, we just bought your house in an auction. I had to file bankruptcy in November of 2011, and the bank that was back in the States, they were telling you that they would refinance your homes because of the Great Recession,
Yeah.
but you actually had to let your homes fall behind and then basically go into this foreclosure state. So I found out about a month before Christmas that I had to move my family 30 days later, and so we had to move out less than 30 days before the New Year, and so over the
Wow.
Christmas holiday. And so I think, when you start to think about like origin stories, that's kind of where it came from for me and for my passion for what we do today. Rev Heat, we're in our 7th or 8th year. I can tell you how old my kids are, but I can't tell you how long I've had the business because I'm not very bright. But, our passion for business is we understand exactly the risks that people take in order to own businesses. And we understand the risks people take to go to work for those businesses because I've lived them. And so that's kind of the if you really think about it, I've been in sales 25 years, and I sold lemonade on the corner, but none of that really matters. I think at the end of the day, kind of the real feeling of how this whole thing got me to where I am today was connecting with the risk associated with it and the generous and the great upside that you have out there as well.
Mm. So the knocking on the door episode, were you aware that it had been sold? Were you in the process or
No, had no idea. Because part of that process was you were talking to people, then the banks weren't picking up the phones because you literally had to let your house go 90 days in arrears,
yeah, okay. Yeah.
which then created a process where they could start to foreclose. And once they did, that was the jacked up process, but it had to get there before they were willing to actually refinance and put you in a better spot. Our business was a home improvement business and at the time and very different from what we do today, but it was definitely one of those things you didn't need.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, we didn't have any idea that it was even happening. Otherwise I wouldn't have had the reindeer blown up on the front lawn, so.
So, so you didn't invite the guy in for some eggnog?
No, I mean, he was cool. I guess he could have told us to leave. And so, we spent Christmas there and then we moved on. But yeah, it's interesting too, but because just that experience kind of humanizes the whole process of business ownership for me because you see the risks and the downside that are associated with it. And it's not an individual decision that gets anyone there,
Mm,
right? It's a series of small decisions or non-decisions over time that
yeah,
extend. And so I see where we fit in from a sales perspective since I've been doing it so long. We fit into that. Hey, let us help you course correct these small decisions.
yeah,
Let us help you kind of bring some momentum into your world. Let us try to do those things. So, but yeah, that was certainly a defining moment in my life because the other thing I would say is those, because you could probably talk to most people who've been through something that's, as severe as that. And what the most people I think would say is similar to what I will say, and that is that wasn't the bottom. You think of the moment, right? Like you go, there's the bottom. I found
yeah.
it. Oh no, no, it's a 2.5 year emotional recovery after that.
I was going to ask you in relation to that because a lot of stuff happens, and you take sales as an example. You've got to get to be good in sales to be sustainably successful in sales. You've got to understand that there's going to
Yeah.
be a lot more no's than there are yeses. And if you play the numbers and you've got the staying power and will stay the course, eventually you can come out a winner. But how do you
Yeah.
get through that sort of phase? You said that wasn't the bottom. It was 2.5 years of, I guess, recovery and rejuvenation. As you were going through
Right.
that, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned that you've taken forward today that not only helped you, but also paying that forward to other businesses that you work with?
Yeah, I think there are a few of them. So the first one I would say is you never stop building pipeline. Like
Yeah.
you've got to figure out from a sales perspective the very beginning, right? You've got to be able to get that thing moving, and it's got to be something that's ongoing. And it's a lesson most businesses fight.
Mm,
Particularly as they're smaller and they're growing, and then even larger ones where, oh, the first thing we're going to cut back is marketing, or it just doesn't make sense. I'd say that's kind of the first thing is that from that perspective, I learned that I never wanted to see anyone else fail because the market didn't know about them. Hey, if your
mm.
product sucks, cool. Like that's the
Keep it to
reason I want,
yourself.
right? That's the reason I want your company to fail. Not because they didn't know about you, because think about how many fantastic potential things were out there that nobody ever knew about.
Mm,
And so I think that was the first one. The second one was it's certainly related to kind of how you open the show, and that is process.
yeah.
You can turn many things that most people in this industry would argue with me about into a process. Because I would say, if you're trying to move, say, a prospect or a lead from their current state into a state where they want to buy your stuff, you're trying to do that by engendering a specific set of emotions, circumstance, feelings, and helping them through a client centric solution. Well, if you have an outcome you're getting to, you can put a process in place to help that prospect feel that way, to help that prospect know those things.
Mm,
And so, because a lot of things that I did even after that journey was because I could, right? I was smart enough to get it done, to figure the shit out. And it wasn't until probably, I'll bet you, the first 2 years we had our consulting company and training company that's all I was doing. I was just better at figuring things out. People would pay me because I was better at Google because I just knew the right question to ask,
yeah. Okay.
right? So, but now today, when you really start to think about it, if you're doing something and you can't put it into mostly a process, I mean, how are you going to reproduce it or how are you going to
Mm,
get somebody else to do it? So I think the secondary thing was you have to find a way to figure out, is there a process that can be associated with this? And then the third thing was you got to niche down, which these
mm,
things sound, count like they sound normal. But think about it this way. So one of the mistakes I made in my previous business was I said, oh, sales are lightning. They're getting softer. So what should I do? So I thought about it. I know what I'll do. I'll add a completely different set of product line because we happen to have the right tools and equipment to add this thing, but I have zero experience. We have to market it as a completely separate line. So I go, oh, I'm going to add this extra line instead of going core deep because I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've got friends in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. You don't have to know where that is. It's 1 million people.
yeah.
I'm filing bankruptcy after 6 years in a major metroplex. My guy doubled down. And as of now, he's been in business since 2006 and still running strong because he
Yeah.
niched down because he said, look, I have this core thing that I do fantastic that I know exactly what people want.
Mm,
And so that idea of over expanding. So I would say those are the three, core elements we figured out. It's building pipeline. You got to assign a process to it, and you got to be able to niche down.
So when you look at that, just take niching as an example. I subscribe to the belief that there's an abundance of opportunities and there's abundance of customers out there. But interestingly, when I talk to a lot of organizations, and particularly how they're structured, a lot of their salespeople believe there isn't that level of an abundance because they've only got a small portfolio and it's almost like it's ring fenced. So
Hmm?
when we talk to
Yeah.
them about, hey, you got to niche down, you got to become the expert, you got to be known as the go-to person or the go-to organization in this space, they then come back and say, well, hang on a second, that's all well and good. And I get that comes, it's a great piece of theory, but you don't understand.
Hmm?
There's
Yeah.
only a limited number of customers that I can talk to.
Yeah.
What do we say to these people? Because I don't prescribe to that, but I can kind of appreciate where they're coming from. Because the
Yeah.
companies I've worked for, I've actually experienced the sales structure where you are precluded from talking to Ken's prospect because Ken owns that in the CRM.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll talk about that whole idea of who can outbound something based on a random account ownership rule of account. But anyway, go ahead. So we're talking about something else, but yeah, that gets me all going. So
So what do we say to those people? Because I firmly believe
yeah.
that if you're going to be an expert in the marketplace, you've got to get known for something specific, right? And hone in on that.
Yeah.
And don't try to be all things to all people, right? So you've written a book
Yeah.
called Strategic Selling Unleashed. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm going to I don't know, this is a dangerous assumption, but I'm gonna assume you don't work with um, the corner hardware store owner around their sales strategy.
No, we don't. If you look at ADIS, I'll tell you what I do, and then I'll come back and answer the question about what to say to that rep.
Yeah,
So first, what do we do? More than 85% of my business is in and around technology. So what do? We work with B2B companies who are selling solutions to medium and large size companies. Most of them have some sort of consulting or services component. They're complex sales with pursuit teams because our entire methodology is written around who you sell to, which is another thing we can talk about. Most people think, oh, well, that method is for my industry. No, no, no. It's because you're looking at it backwards. Because once again, what do companies do? They're looking inward and they're going, oh, SaaS doesn't do that, or
yeah.
this doesn't do that. And I'm saying, why don't we try to figure out what your buyer does and let's build that methodology?
Who would have
So
thought?
anyway, so we built our methodology around that. So that's most of our stuff. So we're not doing a lot of things that are very transactional in nature. We're doing things where you tend to have longer relationships as well. So yeah,
Mm.
we've niched
Mm.
down. Honestly, it was almost a little bit by accident. My
Really?
very first client was with me for 6 or 7 years. They were a mobile application development company. We took them from the edge of bankruptcy to 60 million in 5 years. They sold the company and we just got known for being really good.
Nice.
So yeah, so we niche down too. And so we eat our own dog food, as they say to some extent. So the rep, here's the interesting thing about the reps. And this is, everybody's going to hate this, but they're going to nod when they hear this. And that's this. Based on we've got a study we did called the State of Sales Skills 2024 Engineering Excellence. And in that report, what we figured out is 50% of sellers do not have the basic set of skills to be successful in sales in their industry or for their company, which should
50%.
terrify everybody, huh?
50%.
Yeah. It's a big
Wow.
number. Well, think about it this way. In 2000, there were some numbers that came out earlier this year, and they said in the first half, and I can't remember who it was, or I'd tell you, but they said to the effect of in 2024, 75% of sales reps missed quota in the first half.
Mm.
And so put that together with the 50% don't have the basic skill sets. Oh, by the way, you don't have these people listening to your podcast because it's the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, and therefore you get exceptional sales leaders. But for the most part, what are sales leaders not doing? They're not making sure they empower and train their teams. It's the most critical component of anything that we can do as a sales leader is to teach them to be better critical thinkers.
Yeah.
So back to the idea of the rep. What do you say to the rep who says, man, my TAM's already small, right? My market's too small. Cool. Tell me why they buy. And the second they tell you they buy because they need better reporting and it's a $50,000 piece of software, you know at that exact moment that they've never even tried niching down to understand their clients' problems.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that there's very few salespeople in the world on a percentage basis that actually know why Darren's going to buy because of Darren's problems and what Darren's trying to solve and what Darren wants to do today.
Mm.
They believe the crap that's coming out that 67 to 90% of all the buying decision is made before they show up at you. Well, sure, they're probably solving the wrong problem in most cases. Like, I want you to answer the question. Are they, help them know, Darren, are you solving the right problem that you brought into
Mm.
this room? So, as you can tell, I get a little fired up about some of this stuff.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that because the statistics that you talk about there, 75% misquoted in the first half. You've also said that around 70, was it 70% or over 70% of sellers are unable to clearly
50, yeah.
articulate a
50%
value
don't have the
position.
basic skill sets, yeah.
And then when it comes to articulating a value proposition, what's the percentage there? About 70, 75%?
So we have a partner that we work with, Objective Management Group, and that's where we work with them. You know, they've been doing audits of the 21 core selling competencies for 30 years, right? It's fantastic. It's not a disc, it's like sales
Yeah.
people. And what's interesting is we have a video component to those audits. So they go through, they do this like 40-minute thing, and then we hit them with the video. Hey, be aware of your background, dress appropriately as if we're a prospect, and I need you to give me an elevator pitch and a value prop.
Yeah.
Do you want to see a CEO or a sales leader lose their mind?
Ah, ah,
Show them those videos of their team trying to give an elevator pitch or a value prop because they
yeah.
all start like this. Hey, so we're a company that's really good at what we do because we've actually served one or two Fortune 500 companies who are no longer companies or clients of ours anymore, but we're still going to use their logos because we're going to sell something to you because our reporting system is great and our people are fantastic too. Do you want to buy?
Extraordinary. Extraordinary.
So
I wonder when you're talking about that, excuse me, I wonder whether that's a symptom of the lack of dedicated, targeted training. And the training that people get, particularly in organizations, tends to be very product or service focused because we need to have our sales reps really well versed in what our products are. And that's what we give them as avenues to go and talk to their prospects.
but do you? Do
Do they
you
what?
need that? Do you need to be an
No,
expert on product?
no, no, you don't. Because there's the thing I believe, right? And I say this to my clients all the time. With the greatest amount of respect, your prospects and your customers are not looking for your product. They're not waking up one day and saying, "Oh, I think I might go and buy that SaaS product. Just what I need. That reporting that's gonna
Yeah.
light my fire." No, what they want is a solution to a problem. My job as a salesperson is to figure out what is that problem, how big is that problem, and how badly do you want to solve it.
Yeah. And to create that and to understand it, make sure it's the problem we're solving. And I think there's a great framework out there. And honestly, the very first time I saw it and tried to teach it, I probably really sucked at it. But there's a framework out there called Jobs to be Done. And in Jobs to be Done, it basically says the following. It says, look, if you're a bank, what's your product or service? So what's the product or service that they offer?
They offer finance. They offer money.
Money, right? Yeah. They offer money. Well, here's the problem. That's not what your people are buying. What am I buying? I'm going to the bank for this because the money is servicing the thing, my job to be done. And I want real estate or I want operating capital or I want more equipment or I want to be able to hire more people.
Mm,
So I would say, on a really basic level, if you're a sales leader or a CEO and you're not at least introducing that jobs to be done framework as part of your onboarding process to allow them to start to think critically about what it is people do with what you do,
mm.
then you're missing something that's really easy. Because the truth is, you don't have to pay Darren or I to come out and talk to you. You can just look up jobs to be done on Google, and you'll find, 722 pages that'll tell you how to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't they do it?
Oh, goodness, Darren. You're going to get me in a lot of trouble today. So, all right, I'm just going to say it. So, sales leaders, if you're driving and you're in the car with the CEO, put your AirPods in your ears to listen to this part because you don't want them to hear me talk. The CEOs need to bear more responsibility.
Mm.
Truth of the matter, because I think one of the fundamental problems and the reason that companies get limited is there's very few CEOs who know how to structure a team, hold them accountable, and then allow them to do their jobs. There's a lot of people who want to be surrounded with people who sound like they know what they're doing, who came from big names, and the CEO doesn't invest their time into learning one of the most important aspects of their business, and that is sales. So they can't communicate effectively with their sales leader. They can't communicate effectively with their team. They don't understand anything but, did Johnny and Amy hit quota?
Yeah.
And so I think a fundamental problem, I would say that's true in most companies, in my opinion, below, say, 100 million.
Mm.
That the CEO needs to bake in. I said the secondary problem we have is this. Hey, as you're a sales manager or a sales leader, and the last time you hired somebody to do sales training, you probably hired them like this. Hey, Darren, why don't you come in and fix my team? Right? And then you're sitting in the conference room or on Zoom and you're multitasking and you're on Slack. And then when you get off that call and Darren gave you all this great knowledge, or Ken did, or your people go, what's the opportunity to close roadmap? And he goes, what the hell's that? What do you
Yeah.
mean by business needs and motivation? What are you talking about, Johnny? We've got to have something like, you have to normalize language, expectations, and understanding. And I think that starts at the top. And I can just tell you the difference. We have a CEO started working with us a year ago. He's still with us today. He came through one of our programs first. And then we did him, and then we came into a sales team. So we got to put a little structure, system, and process in place. And we tripled their win rate on net new business because he could communicate effectively the expectations and see what was happening so he could have a real conversation with the sales team and his managers.
Knock me over with a feather.
I don't know. I get it. One of the things we get, right? It's complicated. Don't get me wrong. But
is it? It's as you were talking, it's like I've seen this all the time. Like even a
yeah.
sales manager will bring in somebody like me and somebody like you and says, right, you do need to fix my sales team because they're not performing. And they place all the responsibility on you as the trainer, as if you've got
Yeah.
the elixir.
By the way, you're gonna talk to him 3 hours a month.
That's right.
And then the other person's not going to hold them accountable at all. Yeah, I don't know. Like when I say it, like I hope somebody got how illogical that sounded.
Well, it's nuts because then when you have a conversation with a sales leader and say, hey, it's really important that you're in this as well because you're the one that's going to be, I guess, the custodian of all the stuff we're going to talk about. You need to make sure the language is consistent. They say, "Oh no, I'm really busy. I've got a strategic meeting got to get to. I've got to sit down and do some strategy for the next quarter with my CEO."
I'm going to spend all my time buried behind my sales tech stack looking at reports that I can't actually do anything about because I don't have the information or the power because the sales team hasn't done well enough to allow me a real seat in the executive meeting. Oh man, see what happens. So Darren, I blame you for this because you caught me late at night and it's before I have my first drink. So I'm a little saucy tonight, my man.
But that's good though, right? We need to actually bring this to the surface because
Yeah.
sales leaders need to understand that it's their responsibility. It's not their sales team. Their sales team is a
Yeah.
reflection of them, just like the
Yeah.
company is a reflection of the CEO.
Yeah. I mean, like, would you look at your kids, and this is maybe stretching a point to make a point, but you're going to look at your kids and go, not my responsibility.
That's right.
Right. Like, it's one of those things. I mean, but you know what? It brings up a good point. So let me ask you a question. So here's the question I have. But on the other hand, what's a sales leader supposed to say to their boss, the CEO? They say, Darren, I, I know I need your help, man, but I got a problem. I've been here 4 months.
Yeah.
And this team, well, they weren't good before, and they certainly haven't done much better since. But what am I going to say to the CEO because he thinks he hired me to do this? What do you tell that sales leader? Because that's a real problem because they're worried about damaging their reputation and their ego.
It's a really good question. And there's probably a multitude of different responses to that. One of the first things I'll be looking at is from a sales leader's point of view, what is your purpose for being there? Is your purpose to help create an environment where the team can excel and become great, in which case it's not about you? Or are you there to be the, I guess, the oracle? You're the font of all knowledge that you're going to give all this 25 years plus of experience, and all of a sudden they're going to turn the ship around. Um, I would go down the road of the authentic path to say, hey, you brought me in to do a job. That job is to turn this business around and turn this sales team around so they can deliver sustainable results. In order to do that, we need to bring some outside perspective to work with us to do that, right? And whatever, and remove myself from the outcome. Now, it's easy to say, harder to do when you're in that particular position, particularly if you've got car payments, mortgage payments, private health, all that sort of stuff. But I look for sales leaders who are exceptional, and they're the ones that do not make it about themselves. They always make it about the business, and they make it about the team. So they will, if they need to, fall on the sword.
Well, and I don't know that you'd have fallen short, but I love what you said there because they make it not about themselves. Because what's really, really interesting. So there's a book called The Go Giver, which is,
Yes.
been pretty popular forever. And in my 30s, gosh, whew, that was 20 years ago. It changed my relationship with money because it basically said, hey, the more people you can lift up, the more people you can serve, the more money you'll make.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it's kind of my first flip to like client centric. And here's the thing that I see happen so often with sales leaders, and I think this is the trap. We mistake having it be our idea as the goal or the outcome or the thing that gives us power.
Mm.
But performance and speed to performance is the thing that gives you power. And so you'll sit around, and here's the problem. I mean, everybody knows it. And if you haven't heard it, the average sales leader is in a company 17 months. The
Yeah.
clock is ticking.
Yeah.
You've got to go in with a plan. And one of the ways to do that is to actually go ahead and take executive leadership under your wings and let them know that, hey, there's a lot more here.
Mm.
And the first thing that you can do with that is you need to start to understand and learn more about the systems and processes that support sales personnel.
Yeah.
Because you can have some great sellers, but you're going to have quarters like this: 120% of quota, 80% of quota,
Mm.
137% of quota, 12% of quota.
Yeah.
Because then you're just leaving it fully up to chance.
Mm.
And what happens, we just talked about the CEO, they don't understand that if we don't have a sales process and a sales methodology baked into it and a way to actually judge our pipeline. Oh, by the way, you want to know how you know whether or not a lot of these are in place? Here's the question, sales leader. Can you forecast accurately 90 days out your actual sales within a 10% margin of error?
Yeah.
If you say yes to that, congratulations. You actually belong on this podcast. Call Darren up, have a conversation. He'll interview you. Well, I'm not allowed to do that. It's not my podcast, but still, but most people can't.
No.
And that tells you there are systems and process problems within your company. And it's the very first thing that you can do without going super deep to understand whether or not it's true.
And I think part of that is sales leaders often give too much leeway or too much give too much rope, for example,
Yeah.
to their sales team, and almost take the pipeline or the forecast as gospel, and then they just report up versus ethically interrogating it and saying, what is the real situation? Asking, is there
Yeah.
a compelling event for this particular customer? Why are they going to be wanting to buy? And why do they have to fix it now or in the next 30, 60, 90 days, right? Challenging that. But
Yeah.
also the authenticity within the sales organizations understand the roles and responsibility of every single person involved in servicing the client, not just the salesperson that carries the quota. So the sales director, the chief revenue officer, the CEO, what's their responsibility and what accountability are we going to drive on them?
Yeah.
Not allowing them to sit in their ivory tower.
An interesting way to think about it is so here's the thing. Honest truth, I just wrote an onboarding plan that was 122 pages for 120 days, right? So I mean, there's stuff, right? You can get absolutely insane about this stuff. But here's what I tell you the real trick is, because the truth is, you don't want, if you don't want to go out and hire and do all this other stuff, there's probably 3 or 4 mechanisms that you can pull on. But I would tell you how to identify what those are. Identify the thing that if you change it, it has downstream positive impact.
Yeah.
As an example, so I told you about my very first client. So we had a CEO named Stacy Henry. She's fantastic, and she's retired now, which I'm very mad about because I like working with her. But so she had this thing where she was maniacally focused on, do you have the next step in the CRM?
Yeah.
But think like, and it seems like, oh, such an easy thing. That's a CRM thing. Think about what that does to every aspect of the sales pipelines. First of all, if you don't have a next step, now all of a sudden we have to vet it and figure out why you don't have a next step. And then we can
Yeah.
see every time somebody says, hey, let me tell you about, well, if you're in a pipeline review, you know, they're about to tell you a bunch of bullshit. So that's first. But that one effect, right? It says, okay, now you can inspect this because there isn't that. Oh, now there's this date. Oh, there isn't that. Oh, are we like, there's this downstream set of consequences. There's 3 or 4 things that come just because she said, set the next call.
Yeah.
And so I think if you think about it that way as a sales leader and you go, well, if I do X, right? Like as an example, we just installed kind of this, the quarterly components where you do best case and commit.
Yeah.
And the downstream impact of having your team publicly tell you what a commit and a best case is and then defend their changes. Whew. So think about that. And I mean, if you're a sales leader or CEO listening, I mean, that's a really effective way to determine where to start.
And it's rigor. It's rigor, but it's also holding accountability and setting the standards of what is expected to be part of this team.
Yeah.
Because you might have some nice people, you might have worked with some of these guys for the last 5, 10 years, and they may have got lucky in their sales career so far. But
Yeah.
as we know, there's peaks and troughs in sales. There's peaks and troughs in organizations' life cycle. We have to work our butts off. And what we want to do is to make it as predictable as possible. And the only way to do that is to have a systemized and a process map that allows us to actually have those conversations. Not just with the customers, but also with your internal stakeholders, but also any partners that you're working with as well. Because everyone's got mouths to feed.
So let's go back and tie that all together, right? So you and I have talked a lot about process, and quite frankly, many people right now, their eyes have rolled back in their head. Other than the fact you're great to listen to because you're an Aussie, but their eyes roll back in their head because like process, process, process. Everybody says that. So let's talk about how the art and the science fit together.
Yeah.
And so here it is, because somebody's going to say to me, well, no, Jamie's a really great seller all the time. Okay, that's true. But here's what it happens. About 75% of what enables a successful seller is process.
Yes.
Okay, so if that's true, where's the art fit? The art's the other 25%. It's the implementation of the systems and processes. It's the, hey, we're going to have a discovery meeting. And Jamie just happens to be a hell of a lot better at asking the right question at the right time. But Johnny also knows to ask the questions about the thing.
Mm.
And so that's how you combine the idea. We talked about like the art and science of sales. And I think that's how you think about it, because you have to fundamentally understand those things. Because once you do, there's something really cool that, so most of the names I use, by the way, as a side note, that sound really stupid and like some 50-year-old white guy made them up, it's because I did. So we have this process called flip the calendar. And if you do the right things the right way, what we can do is we try to get reps and organizations to be in the following state 15 to 18 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you can pick any 3 months you want. Regular first quarter, you can pick February to April, pick some random 3 months in a row. And in any one of those sets, your reps or your organization will be above quota. It is not something we don't get these dips and these crazy things.
Yeah.
Because you start doing the right things and you hold people accountable, because we could probably do 6 hours on how we don't hold people accountable today. But imagine how that would be if you're no longer like sitting by your computer or your phone waiting for the call on the Thursday night before the quarter ends on Saturday, because you're trying to get the one across the line that you gave the too big a discount to, that's going to crush your margins and turn them into a pain in the ass customer.
That's it.
So I don't know.
That's all
Just
about
some guy's
predictability,
thoughts.
right?
Huh?
But it's predictability.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, and people might think, oh, process, it's all beige, it's not exciting. But doing ordinary things extraordinarily well consistently delivers exceptional results.
Yeah.
So it's the fundamentals. So as a sales leader and as a salesperson, there are certain things that are just non-negotiable in terms of what we have to do to put ourselves in a position to be able to serve customers and hopefully get them to the point where they'll be sustainably loyal contributors, right? Um, so I like the reference that the art form is doing the basics really well and bringing your own personality into it, but don't ever forget the fundamentals of what you got there, what got you there.
Yeah, like let's talk about it this way. So, very few companies, I think you probably agree with this. Very few companies have a real kind of sales process or system. They've got something in Salesforce or HubSpot, and we arbitrarily kind of move people because we had a conversation. And I guess my thing is on because I got a thumbs up. But
No,
the
that was me. I just sometimes Zoom does the it does, I don't know what it's doing.
so, but they arbitrarily move stuff, you know, through these stages. And I have no idea what I was going to say because the thumbs up really, really got me. What the hell were we talking
We
about?
were talking about process and art forms and science.
I don't know. I'm sure it was super important and it was probably going to change somebody's life, but it'll
As
come
as
back.
what normally happens, do you ever have this when you're running a workshop and you have this brain fart and you think it was something extraordinary I was about to say, and then you remember it halfway on the drive home?
Yeah, or it comes back in a moment when there's absolutely no reason to even talk about it any further. So, yeah,
Yeah,
no, I just think, oh, here's what I know exactly what I was going to say. See what happened? It just all of a sudden I got over 50 and things happen. But here's what it is. So here's what I can tell you. You can go with all these a lot of companies don't have a real sales process that arbitrarily move stuff around. But here's what I can tell you because we'll interview people for our clients and so we'll interview lots of sellers, managers, etc. You may have zero process with your client. You may have zero process at your company. But when you ask that seller if they're a top performer what your process is, they're not going to say company XYZ's process is this. What
yeah.
they're going to say is, well, I do this. And in this moment, I'm in discovery and I'm trying to do this. And it typically takes me about 3 meetings in that particular part of the process. When we go through there, I try to align everybody. Like they're going to be able to tell you.
Mm,
So if you do nothing else in your interviewing going forward, tell me about your sales process. Tell
yeah,
me about how you take from somebody from this state to that state and the steps you go through. Because when you get that one person out of 10 who can do it,
mm,
as long as they're not a cultural nightmare and the other stuff checks out, you hire the heck out of them and
yeah.
you put them to work. Because even if you don't have systems and processes, they know how to repeat their success.
That's it. And then the opportunity and the challenge is how do we take that and systemize it so that it can be spread across the organization?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and that's sales leaders. I mean, we got the toughest job on the planet. I'm going to be honest with you. It's the only place where you're actually judged by true performance. You have to interact with stakeholders who have the exact opposite things they're being judged on. And they're not, it's just because, yeah, you got to get HR aligned.
That's it.
Like
That's
we have something
it.
called the sales talent acquisition routine, and the STAR program is we teach people how to hire. And I'll tell you what, going across all the industry, all the different departments, oh my goodness. But, like we said before, worst case scenario, come up with the 2 or 3 things that are super reproducible at your personal level and then try to scale.
So it's almost like a thankless job being a sales leader because often when I was there, I always often used to feel like the meat in the sandwich. So you were bearing all the brunt of all the complaints and issues around pipeline and opportunities and marketing's not doing this and my partner's not doing this from the sales team. Then you had your senior leaders coming down and saying, when are you going to close this opportunity? What's your commit for the next 90 days? It's
Yeah.
not, it's almost like a thankless job, but it can be a very rewarding job because if you get it right, and whatever right is in
Yeah.
terms of consistent, you can actually set up a system that does deliver those sustainable but also predictable results. And as you
Yeah.
talked about, you should be able to pick any 3 month window in the next X number of months/years and say, you know what, we have with a high degree of certainty going to be able to deliver quota minimum, or at best, well over quota because of the systems we put in place. So
Yeah.
with that, for sales leaders that listen to this, and there'll be exceptional sales leaders and also exceptional sales leaders in training. When we're talking about sales leadership, some factors or some things that sales leaders can do or think about to help increase their impact, right? That works based on your experience in working with a lot of the organizations that you are and have done.
Yeah, I would say that there are four key attributes of any sales manager.
Yep.
You have to be able to coach and be effective at it, because those are sometimes two different things. You have to be able to hold people accountable, or you have to be able to motivate, and you have to be able to recruit.
Yeah.
So if you take those four things and you say, okay, cool. Now I know there's four things. What do we do? So first, with coaching, you're going to lose your mind on this, but you should be coaching 50% of the time. And what you think coaching is not coaching, right? Giving somebody help on price proposals, telling somebody what to do is rescuing them, because you're not making, like, one of your jobs is to improve the critical thinking skills of your team so they can bring you solutions, so you don't become the bottleneck in every process because they need your approval, even though it
Yeah.
might feel good.
Yeah.
But you should be coaching 50% of the time. And if you're not doing this when you do call reviews, well, then you're missing the biggest opportunity in the world in coaching. And that is, hey, instead of talking about, oh, that's great that we got a deal. Oh, that's great, we moved the opportunity to the next stage. It should be, what did they say when you said?
Yeah.
When Darren asked that question, what was your response? And when Darren said this, why didn't we go deeper?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be coaching to selling skills, not deal skills. So I think that's probably first. Accountability, let's just leave that out there in this big, overwhelming box that I don't know how it is in Australia, but holy cow, if I could just get people to set SMART goals, they would perform so much better. Um, Go to
Isn't it? Isn't it?
motivation, right? And
Oh
I think
man.
motivation's the other piece. I have a belief that it's your obligation as a sales leader to understand the personal goals of your team and to be able to show them exactly how your company is going to help them reach those goals.
Mm,
And when that's no longer possible, it's cool if we part ways.
that's it.
But I can't tell you how often I go to a sales leader and what do they say? Oh, Johnny wants to make more money. Maybe, but we know that of the top 10% of sellers that we had in our study, which was almost 13,000 last year, in that top 10%, 50% of them were intrinsically motivated. Right? The money's great, but we don't do it to get paid. And so I think there's this motivation gap where, as sales managers, like, are you writing a plan for yourself with action items and using SMART goals?
Yeah.
And if you're one of the few who is, are you teaching your team to do it?
That's it.
So I really think those are kind of the two components. If you really want to talk about it. If I coach, I'm making them better and I'm in the moment. I can do real game time reviews. And if I understand them, because sales management and leadership is a belly to belly sport.
It is. And people want you to be visible, not sitting in your desk navel gazing and talking to spreadsheets about forecasts.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know the spreadsheets are bullshit anyway. I mean, honestly, all I got to do is put a different number in cell C3 and everything changes. And that's just not the way the real world works.
That's it. That's it. Just one thing on motivation, because I'm a big proponent that because often when I work with leaders, they think one of their key responsibilities is to motivate their team. But their idea of motivation is not what you've just described. Their idea of motivation is, how do I extrinsically motivate them
Yeah.
by throwing either more cash, more rewards, employee of the month, employee of the week, scoreboard ladders, all that sort of stuff. Um, I think that's really important, that as a sales leader we need to make that distinction. It's about understanding what drives your individual salesperson, what gets them up every single day,
Mm-hmm.
why they choose this organization, why they choose this role, and why do they keep coming back every single day. And it can't be for paying the lease on the Mercedes or on
Yeah.
the Tesla.
It can be because they'd like to buy that.
Yeah.
right? It
But
can
once
be
they've
because they
got
want
it,
to go on a vacation. It can be because they want to spend more time with family. So then the question I always get, so that you and I think very similarly in this, right? And the question I always get is, well, what then what?
yeah.
And so here's the easy then what? And I learned this the really hard way. So I used to have this gift. I still kind of have it. But this gift was, a butterfly could flap its wings in 1999, and I could tell you what was going to happen 18 months out. Served me incredibly well in my business career.
Mm.
Well, the problem with that is that I did that for 10 years, and I was always living in the future. And I missed a lot, being present a lot of the time for my family. So I learned this lesson. My children were a little bit older. It was before I got divorced. They were probably, I don't know, 14 and 12. So a little late,
Yeah.
maybe a little older. And we finally took them on a trip to, Florida, the United States, and on the Gulf of Mexico. And it took me that long, right? So that's probably 10 years ago. I was in my early 40s to understand that people appreciate experiences more than they appreciate things. And so that's a lesson that I've kind of played forward to today. And when you talk about motivation, get Johnny and his wife, or Amy and her husband, or so and so and their partner. And you know what? Buy them that 5-star steak dinner for $300 instead of promising them 1,000. You know
Yeah.
what? You want a little one where everyone just kicked ass? Give them 2 tickets to the movie theater.
Yeah.
You want to know how, and the problem that we think, we've missed, especially now that we're in this remote environment,
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be because you played a game,
No, that's right.
right? It could be like, Darren, you know what? I was just thinking today, and you're awesome. Look in your email, because what I just did is I would love for you to take one of your kids, your wife, whatever it is, go to the movies. My only
Yeah.
caveat is this: you got to come back and tell us all about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, that's, at the end of the day, I know I'm an asshole, and I know that I can come across kind of hard, but this is a people to people game, man.
It
I had
is.
somebody a long time ago, probably about 15 years ago, and they said to me, I've never seen a building sign a check. And somehow we think we're selling to companies, not to people.
That's it. That's it.
Humanize the whole process, and you can ignore almost everything that we've said. If you humanize the process, you care about others, because if you'll help other people get what they want, you'll get plenty of what you want, to really butcher an old Zig Ziglar saying.
As I was going to say, as the great man Zig Ziglar said,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
but it's so true. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, when you look at sales, because I ask this question of sales to people all the time, who loves to be sold to? Now, it's
Yeah.
very rare that I get somebody. In fact, one of my clients, one of the sales managers said, "Hey, I actually love being sold to because I get to understand how that person, what their process is to engage and try to build the need and stuff like that." But the vast majority don't like to be sold to. But when
Yeah.
they understand what sales actually is, I think, and I define it as the ultimate form of service. You're there to serve another human being. They just happen to work for an organization. And if you can help them become better at solving what they need to solve within their organization to make them look better and be better positioned, mate, they'll follow you to the ends of the earth.
Yeah. The best sellers have a PhD in communication,
Yeah,
and the best communicators win the best deals.
that's it.
Now, notice I didn't say talkers.
Yes, correct. Because the art of communication is knowing when to shut up.
Yeah. And so I used to do some training for a company called Aslan Training based here in the United States. And they had a concept, which I give them credit for whenever I'm public, but I don't know that I do it all the time. So I'm sorry, Tom. But it's called the pounce principle.
The pounce.
The pounce principle, as a tiger would pounce on, or a kangaroo in Oz.
Yeah.
See, got an Australian joke in. So, but what they say is don't pounce on the first thing you can solve. And you see that just littered throughout
Mm,
salespeople, right? And it's even funnier. So a bunch of the work that we do, because it's complex sales that involve like really smart technical people that support the seller.
yeah.
So the technical people, right? The last thing they want to do is be a salesperson. Like, they don't call me one. Don't act like one. As a matter of fact, I don't like sales so much that I want you to change the title of the salesperson that I have to work with so I don't even have to hear it. And by the way, we're not going to call it a sale. We're going to call it a contract completion. Whatever. It's going to be like, go with that car, right? But the problem is the people who don't understand it, they actually become the people who feel the most like a used car salesman.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're trying to push the product. It's like walking on it a lot. The person doesn't know that I have 3 babies, as an example, and they're trying to sell me a 2-door sports car. Well, no, I need that big ass minivan back there because otherwise my wife's going to kill me because they didn't ask the question. So
That's
yeah,
it.
it's interesting to watch people.
It's fascinating, fascinating, mate. This has been an intriguing and a very enlightening conversation. So I've absolutely loved it. Tell me about the book that's sitting behind you on both shoulders. Love the product placement.
Hey, well, I figured it
Strategic
this way.
selling unleashed.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Like, the major companies like Microsoft and Apple would not pay me for product placement because I guess I'm not big enough yet. So I figured I would just put my own book and then I write it off. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, Strategic Selling Unleashed is our book on how to use consultative selling to drive urgency. It's based upon a concept or a sales methodology that we have called the opportunity to close roadmap. What does that mean? Take all the best sales methodologies you have out there, take what we consider the best parts for selling to large accounts. We group them all together. We add a prescriptive scoring system. And so we remove some of the subjectivity. But at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is it's helped our clients sell more than $1 billion. And that's the exact same process we train teams on that has helped, improve win rates from 3 to 7 times.
Mm.
So I was excited to write it. I'll tell you that when you read it, you can tell that it was the first book I wrote. But but the information is just absolutely game changing if you're somebody who's selling in complex deals, because I love that you've used the word rigor today, because the rigor scales with the size of the opportunity.
It does.
So the bigger you are, the more often as you can do that.
Love it. Love it. So, mate, the next question is, where can people connect with you and where can people get a hold of the book? Because if you're a sales leader, listen to this. You're probably in the market of trying to look for any advantage you possibly can. And what better opportunity than to grab a book that Ken has actually written?
Yeah. Well, good news is then because you see what a smart aleck I am. And then if you actually talk to me at any point, you can just give it right back to me and tell me how I don't know where periods go and commas and all that silliness. But yeah, so probably the best thing to do actually is just go to the website, drivingtraction.com. And here's why I'm sending you there, because if you go there, I'll literally give you a free copy of the PDF of the book.
Okay.
You can buy it on Amazon. It's available worldwide. But if you go to drivingtraction.com, it'll put you into a page and it will say, here's the book. All you got to do, it's an email address, of course, because we'd love to keep
Yeah.
in contact with you.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, look for me on LinkedIn. Darren and I are connected, and look for me on LinkedIn because we put out content every single day that's intended to help people sell and connect better. And you'll see some of the cool new stuff that we're launching for next year as well.
Brilliant, brilliant, mate. I'll put those in the show notes. And may I say, absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It's always good to talk to somebody that gets it, right, and that's out there doing things for multiple different organizations. So I'm glad our paths have crossed. I'm glad we're now connected on LinkedIn. And I, for one, I'm going to get a copy of the book. It's not like I don't need a new book, mate. I've got about 400 books I haven't got to yet.
That's right. I'll do this. You send me your. Actually, I've got one better for you and the crew and anyone else that wants to do this. Send me your address, and I'll send you a signed copy. I'll send you an actual signed copy of the book if you want to give me your address. And then if anyone wants to look up on LinkedIn, and all you literally got to do is tell me that you saw us here on Darren's podcast.
Yeah.
And I'll do the same. I'm not going to charge you for shipping. So this isn't one of those weird book funnels. So if you'd like a signed copy of the book, I'd be more than happy to provide it.
Love it. Such a wonderful gesture. Thank you. So, mate, I know it's getting later over there in Atlanta, Georgia. It's probably dinner time, if not beer time. So,
I think it's going to be a good tequila tonight, but yeah.
tequila. I like it. I like it. Well, it's coffee time for me, so it's about 10 a.m. here on in the morning. So I'll let you get to your evening, and I'll get into my morning. So thanks again for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thanks, Darren. We'll see you soon, brother.
Okay, cool, mate.